Hello, it is July 11, 2023 and welcome to Cancer Update 26. This morning I had my second appointment with my psychologist and we had a number of really interesting topics of discussion and I'd like to cover a couple of them with you. Firstly, I want to go through one really interesting topic that we ended up on that I didn't expect, and it's to do with the fact that I used to drive demolition derby. I used to drive small car forwards only demolition derbies, and I was reasonably successful at it. I actually won two derbies during my career. One was a 50 car derby and one was a 100 car derby. So I was relatively successful as a driver. But when I was talking with a psychologist, I was describing that in the process of being a demolition derby driver, I actually learned a lot about myself and about life. And what I said to him was, when I first started out driving, I would have my driving plan and I'd be like, here's my plan, here's what I'm going to do, and and here's how the race will be. And that works right up until the first impact. And when you have that first impact, your plan goes out the window, and you're just there, dealing with whatever it is around you. And I came to the conclusion, as I progressed in my career, demolition derby driving, I came to the conclusion that you never actually control your car. You merely influence your car. And that actually that's a bit like life. It's a lot like life, I should say, that you actually don't have complete control of your life. You influence it. Now, you would also notice that my photos behind me are the standard pictures, and you will know that I made a somewhat of a promise with you that I would vary them and to keep you interested in the background. I've got something a little bit different I'm going to do for you today. I'm going to show you some of the footage that comes from my demolition derby days. So the clip you're about to see is me mid-race driving a car that had Papa Smurf from the Smurfs, because as you probably tell from the banana splits thing, I kind of like kids' cartoons. And I painted Papa Smurf on my bonnet and I raced as Papa Smurf. And the clip I've chosen for you is one where I get, it's called a pit turn. Someone's half successfully pit turns me onto my rear left quarter and spins my car sideways, but then I correct it. And then another person comes in and tries to, and then we are deciding which one of us is going to try and pit turn the other. And I want to show you that clip just to show you, firstly, how hectic demo derbies are, but secondly, to show you that when that pit turn happens, I'm not expecting it, but I have to react to it. And that just shows you that you aren't fully in control during a demolition derby race, but you can influence it. So here's that clip. Okay, now I hope you enjoyed that. Now, as it turned out, that race turned out to be my first ever win. I won that race. That was the 50 car race. And here's the clip of the moment that I was crowned the winner. Okay, it's a marvelous memory to recall, but here's something to reflect on. If you remember back to that moment where I get pit turned right at the start and I correct it, I react well, I straighten my car up and I continue my race. I absolutely promise you that in a subsequent race, a car hit me in exactly as far as I'm concerned, exactly the same way. And my rear hub knuckle shattered, my rear suspension collapsed, and my race was over. So that just shows you that you can prepare yourself perfectly, you can have exactly the right mindset, and sometimes just shit happens, you know. And there's another analogy for life in there as well. That sometimes, no matter how you prepare and even, you know, how skilled you are as a demolition derby driver, sometimes things just don't go your way. Sometimes you win the race, and sometimes your suspension collapses and you're out a third of the way through. And yet you as a driver haven't done anything different. All that happened was things beyond your control. And in my psychology session today, we spoke a bit about that, about things that are in your control and things that aren't in your control. I didn't know the actual psychological names for these things, but my psychologist printed out some stuff for me to read later, and he talks about a circle of concern and a circle of influence, and that in psychological studies, the people that suffer from certain mental illnesses or you know, mental health conditions, it's that they are trying to control things that are in their circle of concern, when in fact you can't control things in your cycle of concern. You can only control things within your circle of influence. So that was interesting information for me, and it made me reflect that, firstly, that things like demolition derby and things like that have lessons in them that you don't expect. And as you live on with your life, you do pick up wisdom along the way, and through no other means than just by living. You know, that by things happen, and you experience them, and you reflect, and you philosophize, and hopefully you become wiser over time. And I found that quite interesting. We also talked about things like, the psychologist was describing to me people that end up quite disaffected by society versus people that are not disaffected by society. And he was strongly suggested that I am not strongly disaffected by society. And we talked about how that relates to family when you are a child growing up. And what he described to me was what he has predominantly seen in his through his years of being a psychologist, is that people that have families that are judgmental grow up to in a lot of cases to have serious psychological conditions later on in life, whereas people that have families that express acceptance tend to grow up to have much less psychological traumas in their later life. And I can absolutely assure you that the family that I grew up in was very, very accepting. We were very accepting of religion. We were very accepting of race and culture. We were very accepting of various sexualities. So I haven't told you this story before, but I'll tell you now. And bearing in mind I'm a straight heterosexual guy, right? But I ended up being a go-go dancer in a gay nightclub. And one night I invited my parents to come into that nightclub and watch me work. So my parents came in, and predominantly all of my friends were gay. It was a gay nightclub. I just happened to not be gay. But they welcomed my mother and father, and my mum and dad had a great night. And they were simply just not judgmental. So it's funny. I remember the next morning, Dad said to me, Dad wanted to get because of course, remember, Dad was into language and etymology and using the correct term at the correct time. So Dad was like, can I just confirm for you, Paul, the difference between a transsexual and a transvestite? I was like, yeah, no worries, Dad. And we sat down and we just had a really rational discussion about the difference between those two words. And he wasn't being judgmental of them. He just wanted to make sure that he referred to the right person with the right term. And it was important to him that he understood the difference. He wasn't judging. He just wanted to understand, this person sees the world like this, and this other person sees the world like this. Oh, okay, that's how that is. And that speaks to the non-judgmental environment that I grew up in. So, and my mother was the same as well. My mother enjoyed that night at that gay nightclub as well. So I grew up in a household that was not racist, not judging on basis of sexual preference, not judging on religious convictions. So bearing in mind, my mother and father were both born Christian and died Christian, but my oldest brother is a Baha'i. My second sibling, my sister, is a Baptist. My third sibling, which is a brother, is a Baptist. My fourth sibling, my brother Noel that you've met, he's an atheist. And I'm number 5. I'm a Yetzist, but that has happened since my parents passed away. Back then, I would have probably described myself as an atheist. And Mum and Dad loved us all equally. It was all perfectly fine that we had different religions. And it was very much fine that we would have people from different cultures come to our house. You know, we travelled to South Africa. Mum and Dad went to China and they went to Singapore, I remember. And we had friends that were Indian and other cultures. And we were simply just encouraged to embrace it and to enjoy our differences and celebrate them. So it was a family of very much tolerance and acceptance and love. And in my case, I mean, I've got quite a curious mind. So I would meet someone from a different culture and I would just approach it from, tell me how things are for you. Tell me within your religion, what are your beliefs, and tell me about your traditional foods and tell me about your traditional clothes. It was simply that I was curious. I wasn't judgmental. I was just curious. And I feel like that's a really healthy way to be. And talking with my psychologist today, he described to me that very much when he meets people that have psychological traumas later in life, a whole bunch of them grew up in family situations with parents essentially that were really judgmental, that would say, these people are good, these people are bad. You can hang out with these people, but you must never hang out with these people. They are the enemy. And those people later in life end up being quite damaged, and they need psychological help. So at that point in the session, I started to realise how blessed I was by having such a good childhood and essentially good parents and a good environment to grow up in. We talked more about death, and the psychologist felt like he wanted to express to me that I am processing the whole thing really, really well. And he puts that down again to the same thing, that I had a good childhood, I had great parents, I had a non-judgmental upbringing. So now when I find myself in a situation where I'm now having to face my mortality and analyse what that means and think about what legacy I want to leave behind and all of those big questions, he feels that I'm doing quite a very good job of it, and that it is in very large part down to the childhood I had, which formed the boy that I became, which formed the man that I became, which is now forming who you see in front of you right now. So that was very reassuring to hear. We talked also about what legacy I do want to leave, and that has a lot to do with you. That the videos that I'm making, be they the cancer updates here where I'm talking about my cancer journey and things like talking about death, but also my car videos where I say, hey, here's how you fix a twisted seatbelt. That those are me thinking, what legacy do I want to leave behind? And it's becoming quite clear to me that the legacy I want to leave behind is one of love and one of kindness and sharing, but also one that's informative. One where I say, here's the life I had, and I'll just lay it all out for you. Learn what you can from that, and and you go and have a better life because you've seen how my life turned out. In other words, I suppose I'm trying to be a good role model, and if that's the case, I can feel nothing but happy about that. That's what a wonderful thing to be a positive role model. So if you do feel that way about me, then thank you, and that is. By the end of the session I'd had with the psychologist, I guess that has borne out that is what I'm trying to do, and I hope I can be that. Okay, so we talked about a sense of belonging, and for example, the psychologist gave me an analogy that he's watched that tattoos have become more popular over the last 15 years, and that he sees this as being people want to feel a sense of belonging with other people, and one way that they do that is that they get tattoos, and that feeds into a very primal feeling of being part of a tribe, and that we belong together, and we are the tattooed ones, and that gives people a sense of comfort when a tattooed person meets another tattooed person, and they feel like you are part of my tribe, and that is that sense of belonging. And yeah, so that was it. Look, we talked about some other stuff to do with my first ever job, and how when I started out at my first ever data processing job, that at night, one of the jobs I had was running a plotter. So a plotter plots out maps. And some of these maps take about 3 hours to plot. And basically your job is to make sure that the pens don't run out of ink. So you're there and you have to be there, but you're not constantly required to work. You're just required to periodically look over at the pen ink level. And if the pen ink level gets too low, you top up the pens. And as it turned out, as an 18-year-old in that situation, and this is 1988, so I'm 18 years old, and I'd taken a gap year before I went to university. What I did was I got on the computer systems. So the computer system there was a Sun Solaris Unix system, and I have a curious mind. So I'd found the man command, MAN, and man is the online manual. So, and for example, there's a command called dir, D-I-R, which is a directory listing command. So one of the early things I probably did was dir is DOS. On a Unix system, it's LS. So, sorry, there you go. That's one for you Unix and DOS geeks. So LS, which is list, which in DOS is directory listing. So what I did was I typed in man space LS and I pressed enter. And that brings up the online manual entry for how the ls command works in Unix, and all the little switches and options you can pick, and how to pipe it into a second program and all of this kind of stuff. So whilst my plotter was plotting out its thing, I was sitting there on the Unix machine teaching myself Unix. And the psychologist commented, he said, most people would have just grabbed a newspaper and read the newspaper, but you didn't. You went and taught yourself Unix. And I was like, well yeah, like it was there ready to be explored. And he said, okay, but just letting you know, Paul, most people would have just grabbed a newspaper and read the newspaper. And so you are different in that way. And I was like, oh, okay. So the psychologist did point out to me that even from a very early age, I've had an inquiring mind, and perhaps what you are seeing now that I'm contemplating my mortality is that inquiring mind. And as the psychologist explained to me today, most people prefer to read the newspaper, but I prefer to get in there and read the online manual. So perhaps I am in a position different to you, in that I will do this inquiry and I will explore these things around death, but by expressing them to you in these YouTube videos, that I can help you perhaps come to reach a deeper understanding around something that maybe you wouldn't do on your own, and you can effectively leverage a bit of an unusual aspect of my personality, and I'm more than happy to do that. So I'll wrap it up there. So thank you for making it to the end of Cancer Update 26. Later on today, I'm going into my previous employer at the health department of WA. I'll have to be careful whether I can take footage or not. But if I can take footage, then update 27 will be me hugging a bunch of people in at my previous employment. But to be clear, I'm not sure that I'm allowed to show that footage or not. So update 27 could be something completely different. Anyway, I'll see you again soon. Thanks a lot. See ya.